I'm Katie Martin, and this is our panel on the question, are LMSs a game changer in K-12 education? We have an awesome panel of diverse educators who are thinking about this and working in a variety of contexts. So I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourselves, and then we just have a few questions. If there are questions afterwards, they've asked that you head outside and we can continue the conversation afterwards. So I'm going to start with Devin. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Devin Vodicka. I'm the Chief Impact Officer with AltSchool. We run schools in the Bay Area in New York, and in our schools we bring in designers, engineers, and researchers to help create a personalized learning platform.
I'm Hilary. I do product strategy for Canvas, which is made by Instructure. Some of you may have heard of it. I come from education, most recently doing RTI and PBIS in schools and districts in Utah.
I'm Joani K. I am from Mountain Brook, Alabama, in a school system, and we have had experience with learning management systems for several years, and I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Good afternoon, I'm Joel Hames. I'm head of product for Schoology, and spent several years prior to this in some other ed tech companies. But before that, like Hilary, also came out of the classroom, spending about 16 years in schools in a variety of technology and curriculum roles.
I'm April Capuder. I'm a principal of a middle school just outside of Chicago.
Wonderful. So we're going to start, Hilary. Question, just so everyone can be on the same page, how would you define a learning management system, and what do you see as the value of LMSs?
Boy, there are lots of different definitions for a learning management system, whether it's something that helps you turn in homework or gives you a place for students to consume course content. I think that there are lots of good definitions, and it can't include any of that. But I think the best use of an LMS is to keep students organized and enable things in classrooms via technology that maybe we aren't able to accomplish right now.
Are there any other varying opinions or perspectives on what a learning management system might be?
Well, I'd love to jump in. I think I agree. I agree with Hilary. I don't have an opposing viewpoint on that. I think that she's exactly right. I think the interesting thing is to think of it as a platform from which you can branch out to the different types of teaching and learning that you want to accomplish in a classroom. It should be adaptable and interconnected in a way that supports the goals of what teachers and students are trying to do, and ultimately that level of connectedness and support for the classroom is what I think makes the LMS what it is.
So I'm curious, April, as you said, as a teacher and as a principal, how have you used LMSs to help support your student outcomes and learning goals?
I think some of the power of the learning management system is enabling you to differentiate for the students that you have in front of you, whether that's using formative assessments and getting feedback, and then designing particular tasks that you want students to engage in based on that information that you've gotten back. The learning management system really enables a teacher to organize that in a very efficient way and distribute it to the kids like no other system has that capability of doing.
And Devin, now that you're at AltSchool, but previously you were a superintendent, so you've had some experience. What has been your experience with LMSs?
Yeah, so I could almost go back to when I was a kid. My mom was a computer teacher, and there have been different permutations of different systems trying to promote learning for a long time. My first real direct experience, though, was as an adjunct in higher education. Got to work with, different learning management systems that seemed better developed in the higher ed space. And what I noticed was a lot of those models then started to trickle down into the K-12 area. And there are a lot of great things about having a learning management system. I think having one is better than not having one. But I think the area where I got frustrated with them was so much of it was designed around courses. And this idea that you're trying to connect content to students through a course. And our view when I was superintendent is that there's great variation in learners, and what you really want to do is have a very personalized learning experience for each and every learner. And because a lot of the learning management systems, at least the ones that we were looking at, were designed around these courses, and we were trying to design for the individual, we found it very difficult to make that, that match. And so I think this is a field that's constantly evolving, and there are some great new models that are being developed. But I'm excited about what's on the horizon, knowing that this is a space that's evolved over a long period of time.
Sure. So I'm curious, Joani, too, as a technology coordinator, and as you hear kind of this perspective, what has your experience been with learning management systems, and how do you see them supporting your work or the work of students?
Well, there's been several over the years, and going through, and as they are growing and evolving, I think it's been very unique, the new models that are there that, you know, one thing we look for is a product that will grow with the teacher and the student and with what the administration needs, the personal learning opportunities, the third-party implementation, because there's so many, you know, great resources out there to use with your students, and then the organization for parents. So I think it's a great kind of like umbrella to take in everything and keep us focused and allow the teachers to instruct, and for parents and students not to always be searching for things because it's coming in through that great process. So I think it's a great tool to have in your classrooms.
Great. So one thing that I'm struck by, and I'm just going to kind of throw this out to everybody, because we're talking about a system that supports learning, but I think it would be great to also talk about what kind of learning do we want to see in the classroom. So one of the things I see a lot of times is we talk about technology and we talk about these resources, but it's not always clear what our outcomes are or our end goals, and so are we designing for those end goals?
That's super important to think about, actually, speaking as someone who comes from the classroom. Digitizing what we're doing today in lots of classrooms isn't enough. Making a digital worksheet instead of paper one hurts my heart. I know you have a lot of those with really tiny kidlets.
Yes.
But being able to take what we know from research about like what makes students make progress, the 2 sigma problem, if you're familiar with that. Kids learn best when one kid has one teacher. How do we enable that? And technology, I think, is a beautiful tool to make that happen.
Great.
Yeah, I would add to that I think historically a lot of these efforts have been around how do we accelerate knowledge, and my view as a superintendent now at AltSchool is we really need to be thinking about the whole child, the whole learner, and so that includes knowledge but also transcends it and brings in habits and skills and these meta competencies. And so to me the design for the future is how do you use these powerful technologies to really empower that whole development. And when you really start getting serious about that and you think about these critical skills like empathy or communication, sometimes those are best achieved not in front of a screen. And so with that type of an understanding, I think, again, you're going to see the development of very different tools in the near future that really help to empower online and offline learning experiences in a way that promotes a much more holistic development of a learner over time.
Yeah, I think the one thing I find particularly fascinating is we often in education are attracted to the types of the solutions that are neatly packaged because we're pressed for time. We have only a certain number of hours we're engaged with our students. We have only a certain number of strategies that we can employ to support them. And so there's a temptation to look to one system or one tool to solve problems. There's a responsibility, I think, those of us that are involved in the creation and strategy of these products, I think that we have a responsibility to keep in mind that the greatest power associated with this is what we know from research. It's that outcome-based view. It's that research tells us certain very specific things about what improves student outcomes and learning, and that an LMS is a tool in the toolbox, and we think it can bring together great practices. And one thing we haven't even mentioned yet is I think there's a great opportunity to continue professional learning for educators themselves by having a common platform, a common way of engaging with materials outside of the normal kind of staff development pieces. And wrapping all of that up and presenting that as a complement to research-based best practices is really, I think, what the game changer is.
So I would like follow up on that. Professional learning is something near and dear to my heart. So, both either Joani or how are you supporting teachers to really think about how to change their practice or use this LMS to get to those desired outcomes?
Well, and again, the LMS is not the end-all answer. It's a place to bring so many resources together and the organization of it. But, professional learning for our educators, there's all kind of ways to help them into a course that is engaging. So that we still got course design that we're still working on. We have not mastered that all over the place. So using this to help them with course design, using other products that will help them stay engaged with their kids. And I'm repeating myself and I apologize, but it is fun right now to watch our teachers be in a course that helps them take those skills back to those students and get them involved with the outcomes that are there because we're putting our state requirements in and everything. So it's a great tool for our teachers, for our administrators, for our students, for our parents to bring it all. You've got hands-on experience with all kind of things. So I think it's a great resource for us.
So we talk a lot about how do we personalize the learning experience for students, and that goes for staff too. How do you personalize the professional development opportunities for staff? And I've used Canvas in particular, that's what we have implemented in our school, to help organize those professional learning opportunities for staff. So they're not a course, it's a community that we call it, and there's several modules that we have put in place where teachers can go and learn on XYZ topic, whether that's technology related or just powerful instructional practices. But the idea is that our traditional staff meeting isn't our traditional staff meeting anymore. It's a learning opportunity. Our staff members are coordinating and developing those opportunities for the teachers within the building. It happens twice a month. And they also are in the tool at Canvas, the learning management system, from the perspective as a student at that point, so they get a feel for what it's like for their students to have that exchange and interaction with the tool. Speaking about the collaborative piece around where's those conversations happening for students in classrooms that I can go into. I've seen teachers use it where I've got a path set up for you and you're self-pacing, but we have seminar over here, I know where you are in your learning, you're doing some quizzes online, I'm getting immediate feedback, you're getting immediate feedback, so it has the power to give teachers information right away if they've set it up appropriately. It's all about their investment in the tool as well. And it also facilitates collaboration between their counterparts. So the 6th grade math teachers are sharing content and putting the content in there together and thinking about how can we meet the needs of all of our 6th grade students, not just the ones that are in my classroom space.
And I think that's important, that our teachers are collaborating together so they are building stronger lessons because they're working together and then they can share it within the learning management systems. And they don't have to share just within their schools either because you can share globally. So I think the lessons are getting stronger, and so we're all working together for that.
Yeah. When you ask the question about professional learning, it makes me think of a bad experience I had organizing professional learning. When I was a new director of curriculum, I did what I had seen done many times before, bring everyone together, give them kind of a one-size-fits-all experience. And I surveyed the teachers afterwards, and most of them said they were less effective educators after the training than before it. And that was a real humbling moment where I realized in a very visceral way that I had a responsibility to try to emulate these powerful learning experiences for adults. And what's neat to see is as the field has evolved, we now have a much better sense of what are the educator competencies that are needed to support these whole child personalized learning experiences. What are the leadership competencies that are required? And so we're now at the point where we can actually build a competency-based model of professional learning and using these powerful next generation learning management system tools actually enable powerful personalized competency-based professional learning. And that's something I've been waiting for ever since reading those survey results years ago.
Well, we know teachers create what they experience, and so it's great to see modeling the type of collaboration and the contributions that we want to see our students making. So So we've talked about the pros a little bit of digitizing some content and putting things on a system. What might be some downsides of digitizing content or having it all in one place? Any thoughts on?
As a parent, some of the downsides to having different platforms available is that now I don't get papers home in my kid's backpack, and technology can exclude me from participating in my kid's education. We have worked hard at Canvas, shameful Canvas plug, sorry. We have worked really hard at Canvas to include parents in that, but with some other tools that my daughter's teachers have used in the past, I have felt as a parent very excluded from all the learning, not knowing how to help or where to intervene or what's going on.
That's an interesting perspective, yeah.
Yeah, I think we all do a lot of work to ensure we have accessible systems, but I think that's there's table stakes when it comes to engaging with students in their learning process and helping parents be effective partners for their children, to ensure that not only are our systems accessible, but they're available in all of the different ways they might need it. But then, go back to this idea that, technology affords us the opportunity to skim through, get to the point very quickly, and sometimes in the learning process, and you don't need to focus just on the end, you want to focus on the process. So we have to be sensitive to how we're representing student growth and how we're representing content within a particular successful assignment submission or a test, that in the same way a parent might have in the past looked through that pile to see the evolution of, oh, Johnny, you're doing so much better week over week. How can we enable that same type of dialogue in our systems, in the LMS? I think that's a big challenge we have.
I like what you said about process. We brought in, when I was superintendent, we brought ethnographic researchers in to try to help us understand should kids use tablets or Chromebooks, and it was great because they were able to watch a variety of different experiences, and they told us about how they had seen the same lesson in two different classes, one that had devices, one that had no devices, and it was a lesson around trying to determine, who was the likely culprit in this crime based on their shoe size. And in one group where they had no devices, they had all these great ideas and theories, and they tested them, and they out measuring each other's feet, and they had this very, collaborative process. And in the room where they had the devices, they just Googled, is there a correlation between shoe size and height, and then narrowed it down, and it took them 2 seconds, and they missed out on that process.
But it goes back to what we said in the beginning. It's a tool.
That's right.
And we've got to know when to use the tool and when not to use the tool.
That's right.
And it does not take the place of the human interaction,
Agreed.
ever.
Well,
and
agreed.
it's a tool.
The other point I would make about the cons of technology, and I'm a big advocate for using technology to improve learning, but I think at its extreme you can end up with what we call a call center classroom, where every kid's just in front of a device doing self-paced, digitized learning. And if you think about the world of the future, those are probably not the jobs that, that's not the environment that they will need to thrive in the future. So I think we need to be very careful about what do we want to see in terms of learning? How do we create learning experiences and learning environments that promote that powerful kind of experience?
And I want to build on that because I think about, so both in the product design and in the school design, how are we helping educators, families, students create those kind of experiences so that they're really thinking about, you mentioned the competencies and showing the process, so that we're avoiding what we just say, go through the path, go through the curriculum. What are some ways, so the professional development, but in the curriculum design, how do you support those type of learning experiences?
I think that the initial 3.5 years ago when we had Canvas as a tool available to us, it was teachers were more apt to say, well, I'm going to take what I did, on paper and pencil, and I'm going to throw it in, and now I'm using the learning management system. They were just substituting. And that's not creating anything better or more impactful than if they had just stuck with the book and the the dialogue and conversation that they had. So I think it's an evolution of like, what is the power of the tool and how can we use it? And what is the tool really not good for? And don't use it in that way. And so those are continuing conversations, and having teachers visit other teachers' classrooms they're seeing the power of the tool being used effectively is a really important opportunity for teachers to broaden their perspective and get a taste of like, well, this is really a good use of the tool, this is not a good use of the tool. And recognize, like Joani said, there are so many tools out there that educators can choose from now. It's really about what is the outcome, what are the outcomes that I want from the students in front of me, and how am I best going to achieve that? And many times, paper and pencil and dialogue is exactly where you want it to be, and it's not necessarily in the tool. And the LMS, I think, it helps organize things, right? It is a really great organizer. So I can walk into a math classroom, they still have the paper and pencil, they still have the problems in front of them, but they're using the LMS as a tool to organize their learning. Like, how am I submitting it? I'm getting feedback electronically. So it's, there's a balance.
And that's talking about using all the tools that are available into one place, organization. But our students are mobile. I mean, they're going everywhere. They're field tripping. They're athletics. They're at home. They're in and out of school at different hours. So it gives a place where they can use. They've got the apps. They can do it on their phone. They can find something interesting that they see and put it up into the LMS lesson to share with everybody else. So the collaboration, and then from parents, they can log in and observe what their child is doing. And then as the instructor gives feedback, so it's that two-way communication with the student and the parent and the instructor that I think is opening some doors that sometimes were hard to get answers to. Why did my child not do as well? Oh, well, here it is, and what the instructor has to say. And then you can give feedback again. And so you've got audio tools, video tools, depending on the learner, what kind of resources they need. So it's all of those resources available for the individual learner and those that need to get it at different times and places.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is one of the powerful things that you can get from the digital tools is breaking down the walls, making sure that everybody can communicate, saving teachers time so they can do more things like modeling appropriate human behavior for when we're grown-ups and we have jobs. Yeah, I agree.
Makes me think about two things. One, you need a clear learning model, and so I think often that's absent. And then when you're not clear about what your learning model is, you end up just using the tool ends up driving things as opposed to serving what you're hoping to see. And then I like the point about what are the outcomes, what kind of data, how are you making the learning visible through the tools. And I think a lot of the earlier versions of these would make visible things like, how well you fill in A, B, C, D questions on a quiz. And that was the kind of feedback you would get, but that's not necessarily like a holistic portrait of a learner. So with all of these rich experiences, kids are having field trips and other things, there has to be a way to pull that all together so that you really get a comprehensive view of the learner. And I'm excited about how we're now able to elevate different types of measures, the habits and skills and reflective types of thinking in some new and different ways. I think that'll be good for kids.
Yeah. So,
sorry, we have one more. As I'm thinking about this, the thing that strikes me is in some ways, I think we're posed with the challenge of if we took away the tool, if we took away the LMS, would student learning be negatively affected? Would our outcomes be lower? And that's, I think, a fundamental challenge we should kind of face. We believe that I think the hypothesis here is that and certainly at Schoology we believe that it is a value add, that it has an impact, a positive impact on on the organization of content, the delivery of it, and students' interaction with it. But if it's in a location or if it's being used in a way where if it just went away the next day, I'm not talking about would you have to reorganize something. I'm talking about is there a really tangible difference in what students are able to achieve? I think that's the test that we're talking about.
And I think it's providing that. I think because of the third-party tools and the integrated tools already, I mean, all the things we want them to be able to do as a digital citizen, we're getting those capabilities as the learning management system grows. And back to what we were talking at the beginning, it's got to be a tool that grows with what we need for our students. And I think, so we are, I think we are. I think it's got a lot of value, using it correctly in lesson design, but in feedback, so I think it does. Please don't take mine away. I really like it. I found something that I like. This is good.
That's good. And so to you, that makes me think of a question is, how are you guys collecting data on what is working? How are you finding out about how this is serving the learners and helping you meet those outcomes?
The reports that are built in are great. I mean, the analytics from it. And then, again, you're using the third party that have their analytics. So, and of course, you're talking and you're surveying and all the normal things. But the reporting tools, and a good one and built right, that's what you meant to mention. We've got to work with our teachers to build the information out right. But when you get all that in place, which is not an overnight deal, it does take a while, you're getting a lot of good feedback. And I think you're able to analyze what is working, what isn't working, how to fix that and move a little bit further. So I think that some of the reports that are built into it and the other third-party tools are very beneficial.
What about the product design level? How do you guys get feedback to make those changes?
We look at a lot of research to begin with, and then we look at a lot of internal data. At Canvas, we're passionate about building things that support research-based instructional practices, the things that have a higher effect size than maybe some other things. And so we work with our clients to develop workflows that are maybe easier or simpler or something just that we can scale with technology that we maybe couldn't scale by ourselves as a teacher with a classroom of 30 or 100 students, right? And then we look at our data and we see how people are using it and if it's made a difference. We have data from many schools saying that not Canvas improves student achievement, but teachers were able to scale Canvas to improve their instructional practices in a way that actually had an impact on student outcomes, which is what we want to do in the end.
And the importance with a relationship with all of the companies is that we are able to get to the company and talk. This is not working, help us with this, or we want to do this, how we do that. So that is so important, and I think both of the companies that are here and other companies, teachers have got to be able to get help when they need it, and they can't wait, and there can't be a hotline, and it can't be a put in my email and don't hear from them. If you hear from them, I'm happy with that. But getting the research that they take the time to talk with the teachers and the school systems and the superintendents to help us with those products, to help us find those resources, to get our information. That is critical, and I really appreciate all the companies that are working toward that, just helping us get the information quickly and listen to our ideas. Just like today, this is fun.
I think you have to keep going back to what are the outcomes you want to see for learners, what kind of evidence do you have, and then work backwards from that. I do agree that it's great that there's this abundance of data and information, and I love data, and I could spend days just having fun with it. But it's for what? What is the purpose of it? And so, well, this is a little tangential. Hopefully, it'll make the point that at AltSchool, we tried all kinds of very interesting things with technology, using cameras, using trackers on students, just lots of experimental things. And many of those efforts sounded great in theory, but when they were tested with real kids and real educators, it turned out they didn't have much of an impact on learning. And so I think we have to keep coming back to what is it that really improves learning, and that's the orientation that needs to occur. Yeah. And I'm actually pleased that in the field, there are companies like AltSchool, many others that are testing some of these ideas and then finding out that they don't work so that we can focus on the things that will have more of a positive impact.
Yeah. And you mentioned, we've talked a few times about what are the desired outcomes. Mm-hmm. So, there's been a lot of conversation in this conference around the traditional model of education. And we could keep going down that path and we could keep measuring what we've traditionally measured. what's next to kind of shift to the next generation model of teaching and learning? How can learning management systems help that? How can certain platforms help to shift that conversation?
I think that it's important to recognize that the jobs of the future are not the ones that are repetitive or rote. We can't focus just on the 3 R's anymore. We have to give students social dexterity and problem solving and problem recognizing abilities. Those are things that technology, no matter how awesome it is, and we have some awesome technology, it won't do. You have to get that through interaction with human people and modeling from your teachers and interacting with your peers. There are things that you have to experience. And so I think the job of technology is to take the parts of teaching and learning that we can take and scale them so they're easier, faster, better, quicker, and leave people more time to do the really rich interactive learning experiences that matter for the outcomes that we're looking for.
Hilary earlier mentioned staying attuned to, and we've said this I think several times, like research-based best practices. And there's a challenging line or thread, needle to thread. Is that the right thing? Yeah, needle to thread. But when it comes to trying to be on the forefront and being the driver of some of these kind of modern approaches to teaching and learning, kind of rethinking the educational process or ecosystem, and kind of being on the forefront of that, but also meeting everyone kind of where they are. And that the research that I think frankly all of us are engaged with and understand is really designed to help us kind of balance the kind of need to build a system that someone can leverage today, but also be thinking about what's going to come next. We've talked several times about data and analytics, and I don't think I'm going out too far on a limb when I say that the model that I saw us using 15 years ago, but putting a bunch of spreadsheets in front of teachers or big, large ledgers of data is just ineffective. It's not really creating any change, and it's actually making it difficult to effectuate change in the classroom for a teacher. What do they do with it? And so understanding how to effectively leverage the data about student learning, about the usage of a system, the way that it's being managed within a school district, even across school districts, and then surfacing that kind of insight through really kind of thoughtful practices within the LMS, or even working with the larger ecosystem and some of the interoperability standards to make sure that data moves around. Like that's really where we're going to find those kind of like baby steps, right? It's not going to be a huge leap forward all of a sudden. It's not like next year we're going to be sitting up here saying, oh wow, the LMSs have changed so much. Isn't that great? Instead, we're going to say, what have we done together with our customers, with educators and researchers to implement something better for our students that isn't just about the latest buzzword. It's really about something that helps teachers do their job.
So on that, I would say for the educators in schools and classrooms right now, so both April and Joani, what would you say you have product designers here, what would you want as a next step? What are some things that you see your teachers or your students needing that could serve them better?
I think every teacher struggles with the fact they've got X number of students in front of them, all coming with different strengths and different needs, and figuring out what's the best way to serve the student. And what is that data that I should be looking at? Is it the 10-point ABCD quiz, and now I'm going to sort kids based on that? Is it the project that I've designed, and I can see that they're struggling with, this concept or this concept? How are teachers supposed to best make the decisions that are really impacting the students that are in front of them as we're sitting up here on this stage? Like, I feel like sometimes we get so far away from, what's really going on in a classroom every single day of kids of all kinds of needs, social emotional needs, academic needs, and strengths that like, how are the tools helping the everyday teacher reach the students? And sometimes, we flood them with so much information and so much data that it's like data overload, and where do we go from there? So that goes back to the spreadsheets, but even some of the third-party stuff, like here's this report, and here's that report, and here's the reading level, and here's that. It's like, okay, now what do I do with all that information? And I think really at the heart of it is like, how are teachers coming together? How are they collaborating? How are they looking at that information? How can they say, I know that this is, the practice that I've been doing well before technology was ever brought to the table that's really impactful for kids. How can technology maybe amplify or support that and use the LMS in that way? And so I don't know that there's any great answer. I just know that teachers are desperately seeking information and how they can make decisions to best support the kids that are in front of them. And I don't know that an LMS, because an LMS is really content generated by the staff and by the teachers themselves, is necessarily the answer either. It does help with collaboration. It helps with, like, I have this that I'm going to do with this group of students. Here, Joani, you can use this too. I'll put it over in the Commons. You can put it in your course, and we can do some collaboration in that way. I think there's some limits in some of the ways and constraints, the way it's organized with courses, and the sharing of information can be a little bit clunky with some of the LMS stuff. But it definitely helps with the conversation with teachers about how to meet the needs of the kids. And it's a platform for sharing that information with each other and then pushing it out to the kids as well.
I love what you said just now about now what. That's got a huge research backing that we can show teachers all the data that we want to all day long. But the point where we struggle and where I struggled when I was in the classroom is now what. I don't think anybody has solved that problem in a nice way. I would love to see somebody do it.
I don't think it's solved, but if I'm making a bet on where the puck is going on this, it's about the learner knowing themselves,
Right.
not the educator knowing the learner. And so a lot of the tools that have been developed are mostly educator facing, and providing a teacher with a whole lot of data that they can't act on doesn't necessarily change the student experience. So I think there's a lot of potential in, it's the student who owns their learning journey. It's the student who should be taking responsibility for it. And I see that being where things are headed, because I think this notion that if we just give teachers the right data, then magic will happen has been proven to not, it doesn't materialize for the learner. So I'm all in favor of, if we're talking about a learner-centered model, let's really put the learner at the center of their own experience, provide great visibility into their learning journey through these powerful technologies, and help them have that kind of self-reflective ownership of their path that will help them way beyond their formal learning experience.
So I like that a lot, and I think the capability of it to continue to grow is important, that it grows with what we need, what our students need, ways to provide the student that feedback and them to go in the paths that they need to, which is everything we want. The teachers to collaborate, the space to collaborate, tools that work 24/7 on any device, anywhere, big, small, little, and then the accessibility has got to be built in. So just let it keep growing. Let it be easy, which they are. They're getting better and better and better. Easy upload, storage, just all the things we need. So just keep going. Don't stop.
So, and Joel, that was my question. Interoperability is a big piece of that. So how are you guys working on making that more accessible so that those third-party programs and apps talk to each other? What's the future of that?
Well, the future of that has to be interoperability standards, and we have a great partner, great organization, IMS Global, that's working hard on that. EdFi is doing great work in the space as well for other elements of it. I think it's a incumbent on all of us on all sides of this equation to contribute to those kinds of organizations, because we've seen, and I think it's proven to be inefficient and ineffective to go off and try to create single lane roads between specific applications. It's just really heavy and difficult to manage and maintain, and ultimately I think it underserves what a school district is trying to do, which is to put in place the best tools for what they're trying to use. We all want those standards to work to accelerate and continue to improve more quickly. And the only way that's going to happen with quality is if we all have a voice at the table and contribute to that. So I know Instructure's there, and Schoology's there, and I know a lot of AltSchool, a lot of the people probably represented in this room have had some interaction with that, and I think that's where we have to pin our future to ensure that this is an open and free flow of data that really matters about students.
Hear, hear. That's actually something I'm very passionate about. Having my first LMS was WebCT, like way back in the day, probably before a lot of you were born. But nothing spoke to each other, nothing at all. And that's one of the soapboxes that I've been on at Canvas, is that in order for schools to be able to have the money and the time and the resources to pick the best of breed tool that works for them in their unique situation, we have to have standards, we have to support them, and we have to push on other vendors to not have proprietary relationships or exclusive agreements or things like that. All of the data belongs to you. You should be able to put it into whatever system you want easily. So we support a lot of the IMS standards and are very vocal in pushing those forward. Soapbox over, sorry.
Well, and if I put my superintendent hat on, I think as a purchaser, school leaders need to take responsibility for pushing their partners to make sure that things are open.
Please, yes.
So educators in the room, that's something, if it's not already on your purchasing checklist, it should be one of them. Do you embrace open standards? Do you support interoperability? How do you do that? Which standards are you anchored to? Those are important questions that you should be asking.
I will add on, though, I recognize from my time in schools, like how difficult that can be, because you inevitably want the exchange of data that isn't defined in a standard. And so there's a very great temptation to go ahead and accept an alternate. I think there are some models on how we can solve that in the future, to stay within a set of standards, but also provide some of that freedom and flexibility. But I think we're all best served by focusing on the things that, on the common highways that we can all use.
So as we kind of wrap up, we have a few minutes left. There's this theme of this inherent tension between what research says and putting that into practice, or our traditional practices, and making sure that we serve those outcomes, and this innovation around next steps and thinking about what's best for learners. So I'm just curious about the program side or the development side. How are you managing that tension around what's working and what people need right now versus what are those next steps, and how you're trying to develop products and resources to get there?
I think it's really important, as Joel was mentioning earlier, that we keep one foot in what can we help teachers accomplish today, what can we scale, and where can we see that the puck is going, so that we can be ready for when our teachers are ready to take the next step, even if it's the techno-hesitant teachers who are maybe their next step is answering their email in the LMS, right? To the teachers who are pushing the envelopes, the ones who have grown up with technology, I think we have to just stay in both worlds, which makes it more difficult for the software, but who cares, right? Right. What we really want is better outcomes for our students.
Yeah, and I'd just say from that kind of product delivery standpoint, kind of projecting out what's next is encumbered by all of these, what can be this umbrella of personalized learning and the components that come within that, right? Like, where do we go? What are we trying to accomplish? We all have kind of different tacks that we're taking at it, but fundamentally we're getting at similar experiences, student-centered, right? We're trying to lean into the near-term research, or the usable research. We can use now things like a student who understands what it is they're going to learn, where they are on that journey, and what comes next, like that. This is like fundamental to the student experience, and so I think we'll see natural evolution of that, because the kind of market is just simply demanding it. I don't know of a place that we're going or schools that we're talking to that aren't asking the question, like, how are you helping me serve my students better in this way? So I think it's evolutionary, not evolutionary, not revolutionary when it comes to that kind of thing. As much as I'd love to be able to, stand up and come up with some brand new thing that no one's ever thought of, I recognize that, again, it's our responsibility to know that others have already put a lot of thought and research into this and leverage that to produce solutions that are best attuned to that.
I feel like we can draw a lot from existing research, but traditional research cycles are pretty long and slow. And so I feel pretty fortunate in that we run schools that are independent schools. Families opt into them. They pay tuition to send their kids to our schools. And in these schools, we tell them we're going to try lots of new and different things, and we're going to test them rigorously. And those things that work well, we're going to build on and expand. And so we're able to conduct more rapid cycle types of trials in that environment with the idea that we need to speed up the pace of change in using good evidence to inform learning. And we can't necessarily just wait for traditional research because that is going to take a long time, and the pace of change outside of academia is very fast. So we're trying to bridge that gap a little bit by finding ways to speed up our own collective learning.
Well, and one of my favorite ways is, sorry, go ahead, did you?
I was going to say that is super important, and I love, as an Agile shop, we love moving quickly and making change quickly. However, our brains are the way they are and have been for millennia, probably. And there's a lot that we can learn from, the ancient research that academia has produced about what's really effective for teaching and learning. I think we need to keep in mind that we know a lot about what works. It's just how we translate that into the world that we live in today that needs to go faster.
Agreed.
And back to what works, what are our end goals? I think we always have to keep going. What are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And so I'm wondering, I'm going to ask the same question for the practitioners in the classrooms and schools too. Where are you creating spaces for teachers to innovate and to try new things? And how is that helping to inform how you use the tools and even how you push back on the product development?
Go first. Where am I thinking? Ask it one more time.
See if I can remember.
Yeah, because I went off on another tangent with that one, so let me come back.
So just thinking about, you have the tools and resources, how are you providing space for teachers to be creative or to try new things with the tools to inform the rest of their colleagues and share more broadly?
I think teachers who are, there's all kinds of teachers, so let's go there. But I work with a great group of instructors who want to do the very, very best for those students. So they are willing to try all kinds of things, but they know their craft and they know what works, right? But they have the support of the administration, of the technology to give them the support and the time to venture out and try something else. We have PLC, so they meet together and talk about it. So if one is successful, they can share that with the others. So that's a learning space. We have, lesson design in the summer, which gives them that creativity side to branch out. So I guess it's a different way of answering it, but the support is there, the tools are there. We encourage it and want to provide them the space and the time to work together. And then, of course, encourage them to reach out to other people who are doing something that they want to try, which so much the libraries of curriculum in some of your learning management systems are great places to try different things. And so we call it commons, I think, and library and others. So they're getting to see other ways that they didn't think about. And then visiting schools, oh my goodness, just visiting experiences that are good is another way that we provide ways for our instructors to go, oh, okay, I can try that, that looks neat. So just various ways.
That's great.
Where I am, we have, like I mentioned, we don't have a traditional faculty meeting anymore. It's really about learning. Staff twice a month. We have teachers go on learning walks for the sole purpose of walking into a classroom and learning from a colleague for no feedback necessarily to that colleague, just like what is going on in that room that I want to take back, whether it's technology related or not, does not matter. That goes on. The teachers meet regularly, actually 5 days a week, whether it's with their subject counterparts or with their grade level team, talking about students and thinking about how they can better serve their needs. But from an innovation, instructional practice, I'm like, iterate. If it doesn't work, try again. Iterate. If it doesn't work, try again. Because that's really what it's all about. And you have to be willing to take some risks, try some new things, fall on your face. Want me to come in and see you fall on your face? I'm happy to do that. But it's okay, because I know that you're putting yourself out there, you're willing to take a risk, because at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out what's best going to meet the needs of the kids that are in front of you. So, we're implementing all kinds of different things at various levels, and we come together as a leadership team, and they're like, well, this didn't work. I'm like, that's great. What did we learn from it? Now what? What's our next step? Where can we go from here? And I think it's just having those open conversations that failure is okay, in the sense that you're willing to take the risk and try, but then now what? Now what are we going to do as a result of this learning is really where the conversation always has to be.
And I think we'll wrap it up there with exactly what's next. And it sounds like there's been a variety of answers that it's not the LMS or the tool that's going to fix anything. It's really about the educators and really coming together and making sure that we're meeting those desired outcomes. So thank you very much.